Hey, Reactionary Hippie's back. Believe it or not, many months off. I thought we'd kind of try to pull this off again, and I hope you enjoy the background of the kids in the bathtub in the bathroom next door. Dad got a little carried away singing John Denver's great song, Country Road, so now Emmeline is busting it out in her own version whenever she can. I'm going to shake off the rust, though, and get back in the groove and make some comments about the world from a reactionary hippie perspective. And as always, trying not to be too topical, trying to, if you're not going to do this, but every 5 or 6 months, you better say things that apply no matter what the current headlines are. The thing that I want to talk about again, and it's a common theme with me, is the idea of being a producer. With all the challenges we've seen, not just with COVID, but with the weirdness in the world. Store shelves aren't as full, prices are going up, inflation's getting crazy, and I just think this world we're used to of abundance and redundancy and just-in-time inventory and sourcing containers from overseas and filling up shelves with consumer goods, that world is under challenge. And we need to start thinking of ourselves as humble, loving, joyful producers again, not just mindless drone consumers that take the cheapest thing and take whatever the advertisers and big companies tell us to take. It's March now. We've planted some greens and radishes and peas outside in the cool weather. Rachel's starting a bunch of new plants so we can fill our garden. We, of course, have filled our freezers and pantries, freezers especially. Again, we just bought another beef and shared that entire cow with 3 other families. So the freezers are pretty full, but we've been eating out of the freezer in the pantry. Those beef and pork that are produced locally by friends of ours, pulling out peaches and plums and pickles and sauerkraut and salsa and the pasta sauce Rachel made from our incredible crop of tomatoes last year, pulling all that out. Frozen stock for soup. Tonight I get to eat pot pie that Rachel made. We didn't grow all the vegetables. We do our best, but leftover turkey and turkey stock from the turkey we made for our second Thanksgiving. We like to do that 2 or 3 times a year. And the incredible lard that we rendered from this hog. Now Rachel makes great pie crusts. Of course, she makes bread every week, and we're just amazed. It's pretty humbling, though, when you try to eat out of your garden, out of the things produced a long time ago, you realize how hard it is to actually eat that way and produce and conserve and preserve enough food. So we try to honor local people who produce beef, produce pork. Our Morning Fresh Dairy up the road in Bellevue, so much out of our garden and from farmers markets, but it's pretty amazing. I just think a lot of the ills in our current culture stem from us just seeing ourselves as passive consumers because we're so malleable. It's like, well, whatever's of fashion, whatever we're supposed to buy, we get it drilled into us that we have to follow that path. And we're manipulated by advertising and smartphones to get deeper into our own prejudices and get deeper in a rut and just be moved along the simplest way at the path of least resistance. They just want to stimulate these large forces in our society, these faceless corporations and giant tech companies. I just want to stimulate our animal urges to consume. But if you step back and think, what does it take to grow things? What does it take to make and move things? What does it take to actually produce things of value? If some distant factory does all this and processed food is all we eat, we're just drones who are sucking down what's put in front of us. We're not humbled by the process of actually having to make food or build a house or machine a tool. It's just, to me, it's astonishing. If we become more human, we actually build things, produce things, and we become more neighborly. We have more in common with our fellow human beings when we see ourselves as a web of producers dependent on each other. I show up every day. I do something valuable. I sell my products, my labor to other people. They appreciate it. They do the same to me. There's this web of relationships. But when it's a giant container ship coming from a slave factory in China, it's not the same thing as actually looking our neighbor in the eye and saying, yeah, I'll buy your beef and trade you some canned goods or pay you what you need, and we'll all be better off. You know, I look around and see a lot of despair. I see a lot of exhausted people who've been through this COVID epidemic. I see people on the streets who, well, I see plenty of them are homeless. And I also see plenty of them aren't homeless, but walk through life like drones. If you look around and look critically and carefully and with sympathy at people, you see many of them are deliberately trying to show themselves as disheveled, as edgy. I see people wearing pajamas and baggy clothes and 12-toned hair, and they're hunched over and shuffling around. And I think, why do you want to show the world how unhappy you are? I mean, if someone has a disability or someone's not attractive, my goodness, that's never bothered me. Especially as the older you get, you know, different kind of beauty radiates from certain kinds of people. But there's no beauty radiating from these people. They want to be provocative. They want to be deliberately disheveled and ugly and daring. And I think that's because if you're proud of your identity as a producer, you don't have to search for uniqueness. You don't have to search for identity just in the costumes you put on. But when people have a consumer mindset, they have to swap identities. They have to swap appearances all the time to try to create some sort of ersatz humanity. That's right. If I can't feel proud in my family as a producer in a web of people, then I'm going to go to ever more extreme lengths to stand out and show that I'm different from all these other consumers. I just consume something different, something more unique. I also think, you know, our economy, we've hollowed out our industrial economy, which has been a disaster for working and middle-class people. And there's nothing wrong with retail and restaurant jobs at all. I've had those jobs, but that shouldn't be the whole range. There should be more industrial jobs. Beyond the trades, there should be decent factory work. There should be places to produce things for other people. And I think when we have an economy based on debt and entertainment, we start thinking of ourselves just as consumers doing make-work jobs that don't really matter. And I think that leads to what we're seeing now: despair, increasing suicide rates, unbelievable death rates from drug overdoses, declining life expectancy for many segments of our population. If the answer to this is more subsidized housing, more permanent unemployment, and a universal basic income, that's not going to be the solution. The future has to be people thinking they're doing something of value, thinking that they're producing something. They're not just mouths to feed, they're not just consumers. And I'll get into this theme later. I don't want to make these videos too long, but one of the most serious consequences of this consumer mindset is that we don't have children anymore. And we think of children as an expense, another line item in the budget that will cost us a lot that we can't afford. And that's why our birth rates have accelerated into an incredible collapse, which I will discuss in more detail, I hope, another time. But when you think of children just as an accessory or another consumer good, God help us, yeah, it doesn't look very good. They're expensive and they're messy. But if you turn around and think, if I've produced a child, that's a sacred trust. I'm a link now between generations. And that child is not going to be a consumer and a mouth to feed forever. That child will be, we hope, a functioning, creative, spirited adult who can also turn into a producer, who can also add to the world, who can add to our culture. So I would say, reactionary hippie, look up. Look up. Don't just look down at what you take. Don't just think of yourself as someone who is an eater and a consumer. Think of yourself as someone who's amazing, who can produce food, who can produce objects of beauty and value, who can produce counseling sessions or moments where you talk to people when they need you exactly right. I mean, what I'm saying is you can be someone who produces value and good in the world, whether it's material or somewhat more abstract in the lives of people. So on that note, Reactionary Hippie, obviously Rusty, is going to stop and say, I'm going to talk about strange, scary things like low birth rates and ultimate hope that we have if we just look up, stop taking, start giving, start producing, and think of ourselves as real moral agents, not just consumers looking for the cheapest price and the easiest high. We can be better. I know we can. And so Reactionary Hippie is going to sign off and prepare for the next discussion, the next comments he wants to make. Get out there and produce. It's a beautiful world. It's spring. There's joy. There's new growth. There's beauty in the air. And I hear my kids groaning in the bathroom, complaining about how they want to get out of the bath. So I'll cut it short for now. Take care.